Some job seekers, politicians and academics seem to have acquired a deadly disease. It's called fake qualification syndrome. Now, this affliction is allegedly what cost Professor Gregory Kamwendo his life. The Dean of the Faculty of Arts at UniZulu had identified a fraudulent scheme to produce PhD graduates. Are the country's current laws failing to stop this? Clearly they are. Should we put our faith in the newly passed National Qualifications Framework Bill? So, a warm welcome to Julie Reddy, Deputy CEO of the South Africa Qualifications Authority, Jennifer Barkhuizen from Managed Integrity Evaluation. We also have Diane Parker from the Department of Higher Education and Training. Welcome, all three of you.
Thank you.
I was shocked doing my research to find out how it's everywhere. How bad is it, and how's it been able to get so bad?
If I can respond from the perspective of SAQA, I don't think it's as bad as it's made out to be. The numbers are alarming, but these are all the misrepresented qualifications we're able to detect. But you need to understand that for the public service, on average, SAQA verifies over 100,000 qualifications, and it's still less than 1% of the verifications that we do. So the percentage is not as high as it's made out to be, in the media. But SAQA is of the view that even one misrepresented qualification is too many.
Are there loopholes? Because in your systems, possibly, that's taking advantage of this?
No, because we don't issue qualifications. We register qualifications. What we do have is we have the ability to detect misrepresented qualifications because SAQA is the custodian of a national learners record database with 19 million people's achievement records. And so we're able to very quickly verify whether a person who claims a qualification is actually producing an authentic qualification. So we're able to do that quickly. However, there's a lot of pre-1992 qualifications that have not been digitized. So they're in the archives of the departments. And so we have to look at paper records. And during the transition, a lot of institutions closed down. So these records, some of them have gone astray. So we really do a lot of investigative work to really find out whether we can prove a qualification has been misrepresented. We will not pass any determination until we're really sure about it.
Sure. And what's your experience?
Well, from a background screening perspective, when looking at qualification fraud in general, it is quite an epidemic in the market. MIE has verified over 520,000 qualifications just this year. And from that, we've seen roughly about 13% of the qualifications, which was either misrepresented.
13%?
13%, which is an alarming number. And from a background screening perspective, and before employing somebody, it's really crucial for companies to ensure that they go through the background screening process to make sure the people that they appoint are who they say they are and that they are qualified to do the job at hand. So it's really important for companies also to play a part in this. And when somebody
But how do they do that if you've given something that looks pretty authentic? Do you have to call the institutions that they got it from?
Yes, so from MIE's perspective, we go directly to the source.
Yeah.
So if you have qualifications with 4 different universities, we will go to the source to get the feedback directly from the higher education institution. We then take that and give that the feedback back to the clients. And if a candidate has misrepresented themselves in terms of their qualifications, it's really the companies and the institution really needs to take it further and report the candidate, because misrepresenting yourself it's not a victimless crime. It's really not a victimless crime, and it's seen as fraud. And if you are found guilty, you can even face jail time. So it's really important that everybody plays their part, and people looking for jobs should not think that they can get away with it.
Diane Parker, I believe it's pretty rampant in your part of the world.
I don't know that it's that rampant in the higher education sector. I mean, most of the qualifications, for example, that SAQA identified that were fraudulent came from the basic education and from other areas, not really from universities. But the issue really is that we don't want any people misrepresenting their qualifications. And there are different
Why do you
ways
think
in
it
which
stops
this
at
happens.
university or not to the same extent at higher education?
Well, it's about individuals who are trying to get jobs. There's a high stakes industry out there. And I think certainly where we have a direct focus on qualifications is because we do the evaluations of qualifications for teacher education in the Department of Higher Education. And there we know that there is, particularly amongst some subject areas, almost like a factory out there that produces fake qualifications. And we have
What do you
ways...
mean by subject areas?
Well, say, for example, like in mathematics or in certain other kinds of areas where people are trying to get jobs and they don't have the right qualification for it, and they will then be looking for a qualification that they would get evaluated for employment and education in order to be employed. And I mean, that's where the high stakes is, because it's a matter of bread and butter for individuals. But I think the problem really is an ethical problem within the country as a whole. It's a social problem that we have to deal with. So on the one hand, we can set up rules and regulations and laws and try to deal with it from that perspective. But as long as individual people think that it's okay to present a fraudulent qualification or to lie in their CVs,
I was going to ask you about that. Who does this sort of thing? What drives you to do it? Obviously, it's a competitive world and you want to cover what's missing. But, I mean, psychologically, what makes you think you can get away with it? Probably because you can in some places.
Yeah. I think there's a level of desperation with the high unemployment, and it has become a necessary entrance requirement. But I think we also have to be really careful, because there are claims of misrepresentation. You know, at SAQA, we do not call it fraud. Only a court of law can call it fraud. So we say it's misrepresented. We confirm that it's misrepresented, and then we hand over to the South African Police Services or the Hawks to investigate further and to bring charges against the person. And we also then inform the client to take the necessary action. Because there are cases, and we've seen a lot of cases, where there is suspected misrepresentation. But then, for example, university achievement records are then audited and found that some mistakes were made and stuff. So we, the department and SAQA, you know, since we are legislative authorities, we try to be very careful about naming and claiming things because they are protection for these people in terms of the Poppy Act and others.
Yeah.
You know, so, but with the Minister of Higher Education now asking us to report regularly on misrepresentation, we think it is sending a message out there that there's zero tolerance for this kind of activity, that, you know, you will be outed if you're found out.
But, I mean, obviously that message is not coming through, and I want you to listen to something that we did a little earlier today. It's become so easy to obtain qualifications without hard work. I mean, this morning we were well on our way to getting valid matric certificates without even writing examinations, and it was coming straight from the Department of Basic Education. Listen to this.
Okay, kwakumele ngiqede ke ngo-2006 manje ke from mina ke okay, so kumina kuzodingani ke mhlawumbe mase ngithumele lezi zinto kwase uphokotheni
ilokhu njani i-secret message sonke sibo 4000 kodwa kokuha usiphume ngiyaqedela.
Okay, then ngiyasula ngubani
Landa uzokubamba ka-education.
mase nginaso ke mabe ngicheka laphayana bazongithola yini
Bazokuthola bonje kwisystem njengoba uzohamba uyoyilandela wona ka-education.
Oh, ngiyoyilandela mina ba-education ungadlali ngami baba kanjani like
akatshelanga le nto yomkhosi ngisebenza kanjani.
no phela bengamthembi sokamtsho ukuthi hayi wathi hayi angithinte wena-ke ngizivele kwena
kuhamba kanjalo njengoba ngizokwenza mina ngizokufaka kwisystem yonke into njengoba uzofana nomuntu owafunda wabhala wabhala.
Quite something, eh?
Shocking.
Diane, what's your response to that? I mean, look how easy it is. Within hours, 4,000 rand, and there we go.
I think it's shocking, but I mean, what it does do is it verifies the SAQA data, which is showing that many of the misrepresented qualifications are the national senior certificates. And I think also in terms of that, we could probably say that partly it's because that's your ticket into further study as well. That may be part of what motivates it. But what's really shocking is the idea you could phone up a government official and have that kind of reaction on a telephone. I find that very shocking. It seems almost unbelievable to me that that could be
You were
case.
talking about, you said it's not a victimless crime. Tell us more about the impact of these fake qualifications, what it can do.
Well, in the scenario that you just played out, I mean, that person can get access to a higher education institution by producing that certificate. He didn't qualify, he didn't get his matric qualification, and then he goes on to his further studies. And if you produce a fake qualification, you are competing. I mean, there's high levels of unemployment, especially under the youth. So everybody's competing for the same job. So now you are putting somebody else back in terms of possibly finding the job. They put in the hard work, they put in the effort to get the job, and you come in and it's easy. It's easy for you to produce it. So it's really unfair, and it's an epidemic, and everybody needs to do their part to ensure that everything is checked. Everybody needs to work together, especially with SAQA as well, with the National Qualification Framework Act. That will be great, because now there will be a name and shame. Name and shame the people that is caught out, and that is really important.
We're going to do a bit of our own a little bit later on, but hang on, we're going to call her Mojalefa from Johannesburg. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
Two things that I really would like to raise, particularly with the SAQA representative there.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What is happening is that I believe that falsification of qualifications is quite endemic in our society, and that includes within SAQA itself. Let me tell you why I'm saying this. I had qualifications from outside the country, abroad. And then what happened, I took my qualifications to SAQA. That was in the mid-90s. When I took them there, my master's degree was deemed to be less than or equivalent to honors degree. Then when I queried, I was told that they had contacted CHE in the U.S. Well, I checked with the U.S. The U.S. said, no, we've never had any inquiry from South Africa. So there you are. That was falsification. That was a lie. But to show that that was lie, after I queried, my master's then was made equivalent to South African masters.
All right. How would you respond to that?
Look, I can't comment on that without investigating it. But we have, because of the foreign qualification evaluation service that SAQA offers, and people, presenting fraudulent qualifications, we have really intensified our processes to detect misrepresented qualifications. So we do a verification. Now, I think there's a false assumption amongst foreign candidates that if they have a foreign master's degree, there's an automatic issuance of a master's degree on the South African NQF. What we do is we evaluate it against a similar qualification at that NQF level. But we do quite an intensive comparison of learning outcomes, what is the research component, because it's very important that they meet our criteria in terms of the qualification.
Okay.
I do know we have partner organizations there where we first verify, is the institution registered and the qualification accredited in that country? We then do another verification of, was it issued in the person's name who claims to have it? So we do quite intensive verification before we actually proceed to do the comparison.
And I mean, how difficult or easy is it to do your job? And I was going to start naming and shaming, but I see that we've lost the information. But I mean, if you look at some of the people, you know, some of the MPs, you know, SABC, COO, you know, South African Airways, you know, you see them on you know, it's not just matric leavers who are doing this.
No,
are you able to do your work? Is it harder when it's a politician, for example?
Well, first of all, when it's especially people in the spotlight, they are really setting a bad example for the people out there. So you are a matric leaver, you see these people are getting away with it because there weren't really consequences for all those people that was in the limelight being caught out with their qualifications being fake. And I don't believe, my personal opinion is that you can do the proper job which you're employed for if you're not qualified for it. You have to be qualified in terms of, especially in a technical position or in a financial position, you need to know what you are talking about. Otherwise, companies can face financial and reputational harm.
We've got a caller on the line, Nelly. Go ahead, Nelly.
Yes, thank you very much for taking my call. I'd just like to express a view that perhaps hasn't been presented as yet. And that is the fact that journalists tend to report on people's qualifications without verifying the reports. So it may not actually be SAQA, but it could be journalists picking up on issues that are being raised in Parliament regarding people's qualifications through the Public Service Commission, but they don't check to see if those facts are actually true. And people's careers have been ruined as a result.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I think that is one of the things I wanted to say is a lot of misrepresentation isn't a misrepresentation of a certificate, for example. It's a misrepresentation in a CV. So the CV claims all kinds of things. And it might not only be a qualification. It can also be around experience, places where people have worked, all kinds of things like that. And there's often not a good enough check. And that's the point of having this information verified at that point.
Sadly, we're running out of time, but I want to quickly ask you a question. You know, the professor who was killed. I mean, obviously, do you have any more information about what happened there? I mean, he obviously exposed something that's making a lot of money. It's clearly lucrative. There's a criminal element around it, and he died.
We don't have full information on what happened there. We are aware that there is an investigation underway. He was assassinated. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
No.
And there have been challenges at the university that happened quite a long time ago that were cleaned out in terms of fraudulent activity with qualifications. And there seem to have been some, areas in which this professor was trying to deal with a number of issues. One was the quality of the qualifications at the institution, so not necessarily only around fraud in terms of, say, the issuing of certificates, because I think that was cleaned out at the university. It was more around issues linked to, the supervision, the examination of these qualifications and so on. And he had come in with a very strong, management process within the Senate to get the veracity of the qualifications at the university.
I mean, pretty frightening, isn't it, if you think of the syndicates involved here. But thank you very much for talking to us, Dr. Julie Reddy, Jennifer Barkhuizen, and Diane Parker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still ahead, why are activists being killed? They help defend our human rights. We'll look at that after the break.